while we get this working correctly real quick, um, if we can just give a hand for Four Kitchens for organizing everything today and getting everything all together. All right. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, in the back, fine. No big deal. Great. Sweet. So this is a talk called So You Want to Build a Drupal Distribution. And I'm Karen Borchert, and I'm the product director at Phase 2 Technology. And we are based in Alexandria, Virginia, and New York, and have people all over the country.
My name is Eric Summerfield. I am the tech lead for Open Public and one of the team architects at Phase 2. And while we are based out there, I'm actually based here in Texas, in Austin. So.
Yes. So this talk is called So You Want to Build a Drupal Distribution. We should start with, oh boy, hold on, wait a minute. Just a second. This is new. Oh.
Very important.
That's the extent of my technical knowledge right there, is what I just did. Okay, so before we start jumping into whether you want to build a Drupal distribution, we wanted to just kind of talk through what is a Drupal distribution in case anybody doesn't know that, or in case anybody has questions about that. So here's where we start. This is a little graphic we call the Drupal ecosystem. It starts in the middle with Drupal core, and you can kind of think about it like the layers of the earth a little bit. You've got Drupal core as the core. You've got the modules and the contributed modules that kind of bolt on to that piece and have this kind of layer of modules around it. There's kind of a layer of configuration that's on top of that, and then there's the theming layer that is making the sites look like what you want it to look like. And in some cases, there are some folks who will take a kind of a slice of that, of core modules, themes, configuration, and build an installation profile. So you might use that if you're, for instance, wanting something that you can always start with in your company when you're building a Drupal site. You might build an installation profile that has kind of all the pieces that you always use. And then there's another piece that, another layer on top of that of some other things that really kind of help define what we call in Drupal a distribution. So that's things like features, documentation, best practice, and community that on top of the installation profile build what we call a distribution. Distributions generally have a bit of community around them. They sometimes, they're a little bit more likely to be kind of marketed and branded in Drupal. And that's what we're talking about today when we're talking about distributions versus installation profiles. There's a lot of occasional controversy about whether it should be called an installation profile or a distribution, but that's the way we use it. So now you know. So the reason that we're giving this talk is because at Phase 2 we work with 3 of the main distributions that are in the Drupal space: Open Public, Open Publish, and Open Atrium. And we have learned a lot from doing that. And in addition to learning a lot from doing that, we spent a little bit earlier this year interviewing other firms all over the country and all over the world that use Drupal distributions or that build Drupal distributions. And we wanted to find out a little bit more about why, how, and what they did. And one of the very first things that, hold on a second, one of the very first things that we found when we started asking people, do you use Drupal distributions, was that people said, well, I'm kind of thinking about building a Drupal distribution. And of course, my question to that was, why? Why? So I really wanted to know. And almost every time the answer started with, well, I built this thing. I built this thing. And then there were about 4 things that they would say after that. So they'd say, I built this thing, and I think it would be really cool if we made it into like this branded product. Or, I built this thing, and I think a lot of other people would really want to solve similar problems, and they would totally use it. I think everybody would really find it useful. Or, I built this thing, and we really want to have kind of a standard base for building our projects. Or, I built this thing, and I'm pretty sure it's going to make me really rich right away. And that's the one that is really, really easy. That's the one that we just see in this decision tree. Just please don't do that. If you're in it just because you think it's going to make you rich, then it's a good business not to be in if that's what you're in it for. But for the rest, there's kind of a lot of decisions that go into building Drupal distributions and the why and the how of it. So Eric and I are going to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about the why you would decide to do that in the first place, and Eric's going to talk about how you decide to do it and do it right. I want to say up front that this is not a cautionary tale against building Drupal distributions. We continue to build them and maintain them in our company, and we're really, really glad that we do. They have a lot of benefits for us. Eric and I were practicing this, and he said, do you get to the end of this and feel a little bit sad, like, oh my God, how am I ever going to build a Drupal distribution given all of these things? And I said, kind of, I understand that, but on the other hand, there are so many pitfalls to avoid, lessons that we've learned, lessons that others have learned. So this is kind of the collective knowledge and experience that we brought, and that a lot of our colleagues have brought to the distribution building experience, and so that's what this is about. It's not a cautionary tale. All right, so first one is you want to build this branded product. So if that's the case, oh, by the way, also this decision tree plan, this whole method, this is all Eric's idea. He was like, what you really need is a super huge decision tree. And so here's what we go. So we're going to go through this.
She says that because she thinks you aren't going to like it. But I think you will. So,
yeah, I think you're going to like it. So the first question to ask, if what you're in it for is this branded product, are you willing to invest in that brand? And a brand doesn't just happen because somebody puts a name out there or a logo out there on the web and says, like, this is our brand. That does not a brand make. So if you're not willing to invest in a brand, we suggest taking this in the direction of being a great community rock star. Branded products are not the only way to be cool, known, or recognized in Drupal. As many of you know, as many of you are well known in the Drupal community, being a community rock star can bring the same benefits without the brand investment. If you are willing to invest in the brand, then you may have a marketing reason for building a distribution, and that can be a great thing. Distributions can be great marketing tools. They have been for phase 2, and they are for a lot of organizations. So the next possibility is, I think a lot of other sites want to solve similar problems, and they would totally use it. So if that's the case, you got to start with, finding out whether you have a compelling business case here. And if your answer is totally, then you can skip all of this other stuff. But if you don't know, you want to start with a couple of important business questions. The first one is, are there people who actually want to use it? Now this, if you are a local Austinite and ever drive down Lamar, is Donut Taco Palace 3, the grand opening of Donut Taco Palace 3. Now when I drove past this place, I had never really seen Donut Taco Palace 1 or 2, but this is proof positive of a market. There is a market for the Donut Taco Palace, as evidenced by the fact that they have now opened 3 locations of it. This is the no matter how obscure your idea for a distribution, there may just be a market for it, but you've got to find out if there truly is. Not just what you think there might be, you think people would want to use it, but people actually coming to you and saying, I will use that. Can we build that? Let's do that. We need that. That proof of market is extremely important. So are the people that are asking for it? So again, if no market, no distro. Don't build something for nobody. Trust me, you will not enjoy the return on that investment. If there are people that are asking you for it, then great, you've got a market. And so now you got to ask yourself the competition question, right? Are there others who are offering something similar? And others offering something similar in open source and in Drupal is a little different than if you're asking that same question if you're building just your kind of ordinary proprietary for-profit company. If there's nobody offering anything like what you're talking about and you've got a definite market for it, then hooray, you're all off to the races. But if there are people that are building something similar, you got to ask yourself, are you willing to join that effort? And if you are willing to join that effort, then hooray, that's awesome. Join up with another distribution or another project and be a co-contributor and a co-maintainer. And if you're not, no, that's okay, that's good. And if you're not, then that's okay too. That's what open source and forking and Drupal and all of these things are all about, right? Like there's a reason that this community, builds and expands, all of what we do, because people feel like they have, a better idea. But make sure your idea is definitely better. Definitely better. If your idea is not definitely better, distros are way too expensive to not be done well. Way too expensive to not be done well. If your idea is definitely better, and you've got a market, and you've figured out the competition question, you may have a business reason for building a distribution. All right. Oops. Don't know how that happened.
I pushed the wrong button.
Oh, that's how that happened. Okay, we're going to keep going along. So if you have a question of, we really want to build something for ourselves. This is something we heard all the time when we were talking and interviewing people. They'd say, oh, I'm thinking about building a distribution. Oh, yeah? Why? Oh, well, we're kind of interested in having a build base for our company, like something that, something that we can use for every project. And the next question was, well, so you're going to release it? No. No. Like, that's not a distribution. So I think you can click through.
Yeah.
If it's not distributed, it's not a distribution. You will not earn yourself any community points by telling everybody what an amazing distribution that you've built that you will not release. That will be less fun for everybody. If you are willing to release it, then the next question that you want to ask yourself is, if you think back to that my layers of the earth diagram, that outer layer is this layer of community. Are you willing to build a community around it? Documentation, issue queue management, that kind of thing. If your answer is no, you got to join one or build one. Those are the options. So if you're going to build a distribution and completely, not have any community around it, I think you may be better off with an installation profile. An installation profile is another option for a base build distros that don't necessarily have as many community assets around them and might not be as cumbersome to maintain. If you are willing to build community around it, then that's great. Then you may have a base build reason for building a distro. So if any of those reasons lead you to having a good reason to build a distribution, or maybe there's a couple of reasons for doing it, then hooray, you have a good reason to build something. And then I think I'm going to pass it up to you now, right?
Yeah.
Now.
So now we get to the part where you have a good reason. Are you prepared, basically, to build a distro? And for me, this is the part that actually gets the most depressing. Because mostly because I see all the pitfalls that we made going through our process of making distros. But I'll try to be on the brighter side while explaining it. So the first thing is, have you built sites with this? Have you went out and built some publishing sites if you're going to build a publishing distro? Have you built some educational sites if you're going to target building a distro for higher education? If you haven't built any sites, then you're going to flounder over and over again when we go through this. And the example that I like to bring up on this is our difference between our open public and our open publish. When we built open publish, we had built at least 20, even probably more than that, publishing sites. We had really good use cases for what publishers wanted. And we weren't thinking, we were thinking creatively about how to solve these problems, but we weren't thinking creatively about what the problems are. And so when we went to go build the distribution, we had our problem set, we went and built solutions for that. A lot of them we took from past projects. And the cost of doing that was dramatically less. When we built Open Public, we had built some government sites. But we stretched and we started trying to solve some problems that we didn't necessarily hadn't solved before, or other people hadn't presented to us before. And so I find the farther away you get from doing real work for people who actually need websites, the more you're going to get into spending money on stuff that you ended up wasting that time with. So if you haven't built it, go build some sites. The energy and effort you spend in that is going to be well worth doing that before you go and build your distro.
Now, where Open Public is now, after building so many sites with it and adding so much back into it from actual experience, is just far and away better and less expensive overall than it was early on.
And we'll talk about that.
Sorry.
that pricing part when we get later on too. So sorry,
Yep.
we're supposed to.
We missed one.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yes.
All right. So let's say you've built the sites. That's very good. So now the question comes down to what the problem that you're solving with your distro. Is it something that's for all of the Drupal community? And this happens a lot with people. They'll be like, well, I want to build a distro that has this really great commenting system in it because I don't like the way the Drupal commenting scales. That's great. Drupal would really need something that had a better scaling commenting system. But really, that's not something for distribution. That's something that's going to be fit into a module or an app or something smaller that we can use all across the system. So if your idea is not targeting a particular vertical, a particular subset, then you're probably looking at a module or an app. And the way that I kind of look at this is like the whole beauty of having a distro is that you narrow down the market so you can be more precise in targeting something. So if your solution's for the whole market, for everybody who uses Drupal, then you're not in that space. So the other part of this is like, well, should I be building an app or a module? And I don't want to go too deep into apps because it would take up this presentation. But the way I try to look at this is, am I building a tool that's sort of general that people are going to like want to configure and do, or am I trying to hit a specific solution? So like, for example, we built an app for doing FSBA moderate compliance. What that used is a whole bunch of Drupal modules that had very generic settings, but it came with the proper settings to be FSMA moderate compliant. So that's a good implementation of Drupal modules that fits into an app scenario, which is also a lot of the ideas that came to us. It was like, I want to make this FSMA compliant, I want to make this accessible, like these kind of things that are off in configuration. Do I have a bubble?
You do.
I think I said that, didn't I?
You did.
All right. Hate when that happens.
Sorry.
So the next one is, are you a Drupalista, or do you have Drupalistas to lean on? And when we say this, we don't just mean somebody who's worked in Drupal. We really mean somebody that understands a lot of the core properties of Drupal, the core systems, some of the big contrib module systems. When you build a distro, you're going to be dipping into a lot of things. So having that knowledge is important. The next piece, though, is it's not just that. It's also being part of the community. Right? When you build a distro, you're going to be in lots of issue queues. You're going to have people telling you that that module is the stupidest thing that you ever built in the whole world in an issue queue. Right? And you're going to have to learn how to accept that. And when you have people on staff that have done that, and they go, oh, yeah, that person just said that thing because, I don't know, they were mad about something, right? Like, these skills that you get, these softer skills, are also really, really important for the distro. Because you're going to be dealing with people that want to use your stuff and have really frustrating problems with it. But you need to be able to communicate with them and, and often help them to solve that problem for you. So if you don't have those people, or you're not that person, you should go off and try to become that person. And the best way of doing that is to go and start contributing, right? Go build a module. Your first thing that you contribute probably should not be a distribution. It's way too big, and you're just gonna, you're gonna be shooting yourself all the way. So go build some modules. Go help on some modules. Go get those soft skills and start digging deep into, try to go and write a new filter for views. That is going to be a crazy exercise that's going to get you lots of skills as you learn how people have tried to construct things. But if you have those, or you have those people around, that's always great. The next question then comes to this community thing again. And we talked about in the first part, and we talked about here, and I think we might even talk about it later on. It's really, really important. So the community is what really makes the products work. It's what makes the things get fixed. And makes it so that you can sustain the product as you move forward. So it's really important that you have community. So first, check and see if there's a community out there that already exists that's doing this, just like we said before. If it is, go and join it. And what I like to talk about in this scenario is that one of the things that I really love about open source is the concept of being able to fork, right? So I can take, if someone doesn't want to do it the way I want to do it, I can take it and go do something else. The best part about that is, that means I don't have to do it right now. I can wait, right, until all things have been exhausted. So I go to see, that thing's not exactly what I want to do, but it's kind of close. So I go engage in the community. Maybe I do some contributing to what they're doing. And I work at it. And then finally, I've done some patches, and they go, that's just not the direction that we want to go. All right, I take my stuff and go another direction. And I didn't lose anything by doing all that engagement. So that's why we always push to always try to engage first before you try to go off on your own. Did you skip me a
Nope.
slide?
Sorry, we're at the note.
Oh, no, okay.
Yeah.
Right, so if there isn't a community, then we talk about building the community. And, if you're not going to build the community, you're going to end up in a situation where you have so much work that you're never going to get any of it done. I mean, that's the biggest part of what the community comes in. The other big thing you're going to get is this idea that you're going to go and solve problems that don't exist. Part of what a great community does is helps target what you need to work on. What part of your system is not working well? I had a conversation actually earlier today about one of the big problems with apps. And the big problem with apps is being able to download them, because we use Core for all this crazy FTP stuff. And you know what? We don't have that problem internally. We would have never realized that. But we've heard it over and over again. And then we went to see how those people are doing it in the other environments. And we're like, this is a big problem. This is something that needs to be solved. So you get the help in solving those problems, but you also get to find out what are the problems that are going to get encountered outside of your little microsystem. and if you don't do that, what you're going to end up doing is have this product that has all these problems, and people aren't going to use it, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, they built that distro and it sucked. And that's like one of the worst things you can do if you're trying to build a brand, or if you're trying to show that you can do something in a market. So if you're ready to build a community, now we have to talk about what it costs to build that community. And so when we get to this question, if you think the answer is yes, I would suggest going through no a couple times. Because just going over it, and we look at how much it's going to cost to build, to maintain it, to document it, to support it, to train it, to do all of those things around what you're going to do with the distro. You can go to my bubble.
Go to your bubble.
So last year, Phase 2 spent over $1 million on distros and support of our contrib stuff. The scariest part about that is that we saw that number after we had done work, which was, oh my gosh, that was a lot of money we spent. Now, I loved working on OpenPublic and building that. I didn't realize exactly how much money was getting spent while we were doing that process. So this is where you circle back and look at what that's going to be. Now, it was a lot of money. That doesn't mean we wouldn't go back and do those things again. We really get a lot of value out of having products. But it's worth going back and looking at how much it's actually going to hit you for. So Karen's going to talk about the second part of the cost, which is the more maintaining, not just building part of it.
Right. So understanding your total cost of ownership, not only what it's going to take to build this thing, but what it's going to take to keep owning something like a distribution is really, really important. And it's so important that we're not even giving you a yes/no option here, and we're just giving you the I don't know. And the I don't know is important because really very few people, and I would say we're still learning it too, really know what the total cost of ownership on products and Drupal and that kind of thing should be. So there's a couple of different ways to look at total cost of ownership and ways to support a distribution like this going forward. So there's you can ask yourself a couple of different things. First, do profit margin to support it. That's probably the main way that people build anything outside of their client work, right? They just take a little margin off the top in their company and they say, we're going to spend a few weeks sprinting on this module or this distribution or this installation profile or whatever it is that they want to work on, or this mobile app, for any of these things. And that's a way that a lot of companies will sustain the total cost of ownership here. There's another one, can you fund this with paid client work? Can you potentially go to a client and say, we want to work with you and get you, build something that will be great for the community as a distribution, but also great for your site. That's something that we've done. It's something a lot of folks have done. I think, being upfront about it is very important, but it's a way that sometimes a client can get more than they were hoping for, and you can get more than you were hoping for if you kind of fund it together. Can you get sponsorship or dedicated funding? There are lots of people out there now starting to gather sponsorship. There's a new organization called Drupal Fund, or a new site called Drupal Fund that's kind of Kickstarter for Drupal projects specifically. There's people go for investment and even venture capital for projects and for companies that will spur products like this. So that's an option. And can you sell services or content within the distro? The guys at Lullabot do this really, really well. They have a distro called Videola, and they have a site called Drupalize Me. And Drupalize Me is training videos for everything in Drupal, and it runs on their video distribution called Videola. And a lot of the proceeds from Drupalize Me actually come back to support the development of Videola. It's a great model. Commerce Guys with Commerce Kickstart actually just launched something very similar with Commerce Kickstart, where they actually have a partnership with one of the payment provider that people can engage with within the distribution and use that service. And because Commerce Guys is bringing all of those new customers to that payment provider, they have a revenue share among them. So there's actually services right in the distribution that can be sold and that can help sustain the distribution too. Or is Scrooge McDuck your uncle and you just happen to be really, really rich? That's fine. I have a lot of cartoons in this. Thanks to the one guy that laughed, by the way. So if the answer to any of those things or some of those things is yeah, you want to check, are you sure about that? One thing to note here is that these, different ways of sustaining a distribution, you don't have to choose one of them. You don't have to have all of them. It could be one or many or some of these of those options or things that we haven't thought about either. But the important thing is that shucks.
That's what happens when you try to.
That's right. That's right. That is what happens. Is that if you underinvestment and under representing and understanding your total cost of ownership can lead to a lot of frustration for everyone. Find the funding and the business models you need before you build anything. I think there are some people who feel a little trapped in their distributions, like they've built this distribution, they didn't realize it was going to be something that was going to take a lot to sustain it, and then they've got it, and they don't want to look bad in the community for having it, and yet sustaining it, is kind of this ongoing drain. So finding either the business models that support it, or funding that supports it before you build it, can save you a lot of frustration. If you do have business models, if you do have funding, and you know all of those other things that Eric talked about, then yay, you should totally build a distribution, definitely. And also, always, you should be a community rock star. So that's our talk on distributions, the whys, the hows, the what to avoid, and we'd love to take your questions if you